Hello, everyone. Welcome back to OTD Military History. Today, we're just going to be doing a live stream, hanging out. I mentioned in the description it's my birthday today, so just kind of wanted to hang out, answer any kind of questions, talk about whatever. People have things they want to talk about, or questions, or anything of that nature. So if you got anything, fire away. Looking forward to it. And yeah, just get to hang out a little bit before having to do some stuff this afternoon. So thanks everyone for the birthday wishes. I appreciate it. So a few things coming up, not necessarily on the channel specifically, but a few things. So I'll be on World War II TV at the end of the month, literally last day of the month, on the 31st, talking about 5th Canadian Infantry Brigade and the fighting at the Walcheren Causeway. We talked about that a little bit on the channel before. Had Mark Zilke on to talk about the overall Canadian campaign in the Scheld. So this, me on World War II TV, is going to be like a hyper-focused. We're just going to be talking about that basically slug match that was the fighting for the Causeway that lasts basically 2 days to take the Causeway and to actually get into Walcheren Island from the east. So we'll be looking at that, and I'm going to do as many deep dives as I can in the style I typically try to do, with personal insights of those who were there, pair that with primary documents from the time and recollections afterwards as well, if necessary. So trying to do that. So I'm looking forward to talking about the Scheld more, because as a lot of you know, the 80th anniversary of the Scheld is now. The campaign has been officially started. They count the 2nd as the first day of the Scheld. You could push it back earlier if you wanted to. There was an action almost mid-September 44. We're trying to get past the Leopold Canal. That doesn't go well. That's like the southern end of the Breskins pocket, more or less, how it develops. But yeah, that's that. So there's lots to be discussed on the Scheld, right? We did live streams on the battle covering all kinds of topics. Way 2 years ago now, I believe, roughly around this time. So those are still up if you haven't seen those. I highly suggest checking them out for deep dives on, we did our air power, what it was like flighting, and the conditions, the flooded wet conditions, and the plotters, those reclaimed areas below sea level. Looked at engineers, a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah, it's a massive campaign, high number of casualties, difficult fighting, not discussed as much as I would think it should be. I mean, I'm not the only one in that. Thank you everyone for the support. I really appreciate it, and the birthday wishes. Thank you. I know Norma will agree with me. I don't know if she's here, but she would agree that the Scheld is not discussed enough and its importance. But yeah, so I think that's the date. I'm not sure if they count completely liberated. Anyway, it's early September, right? Because they're still pushing past the Seine late August. So into September's, right? They're moving fast though, right? Past the Somme and quick into those areas, particularly into Antwerp. The area past is not taken until later. There's a huge controversy there. So, for my patrons and YouTube channel members, have early access to a reaction video I did. The Canadian Legion just released a video, kind of an overview of the Scheld, deep dives into some things. Others are not really discussed. Same sort of thing with some personal stories, some deep dives, talking about the higher up stuff. So I did a reaction to that. You can check that out, where I kind of fill in some blanks and kind of give my thoughts on some stuff. If you are a channel member or a patron, you can check that out. If you're not, please consider signing up for that. Just a few bucks a month makes all the difference in the world to keep this going, which is becoming increasingly more difficult again for numerous reasons. And I'll talk about that in a bit, because somebody asked me, I put something on Twitter a couple of days ago, and somebody asked me to kind of expand on that. So I will do that. But yeah, the Scheld is a fascinating campaign. Lots of detail, lots of units involved. There's Brits involved, which is always good to have, right? You have, it's giving me the top of my head. Special Forces, basically what becomes the Special Forces. The Special Service Brigades, I think there's 2 involved. Landing at Walcheren as part of Operation Infatuate, which we had Stephen Fisher on talking about that. I believe he's doing a book on it now, which is very cool. Commandos, that's the word I'm looking for. Thank you, Pat. Yeah, it's a fascinating look at that too, and we'll see when Stephen comes up with that book. I'll take a look at that, and probably not for a bit yet because he just did one on swords, so I'm sure he's got lots of the irons in the fire. So keep an eye on that. But yeah, it's got a lot going on. You've got seaborne landings, you've got pushing through. There's muddy conditions, wet stuff. It's got everything. And then some of these landings are going west instead of east, which is fascinating. Just how the campaign develops, and then literally they're going backwards into Belgium. That's Operation Switchback, which I did a little bit of talking about that in the Highland Light Infantry video that I did on their service overall. And that's something I want to talk about just in a second, but I just want to say thank you. I appreciate it, and supporting the channel, watching. I really appreciate it. And thanks, Pat. Yeah, I try to share as much as I can on Patreon as well of other things, right? Because I'm always working on other stuff. I do other projects as well. It's not just OTD. There's other stuff going on there. So I try to share from that, or if I come across anything, or we're at a really interesting anniversary that I know has some really cool documents behind it that I've seen in the past, and I'll be sure to share those. I just shared a bunch from the First World War because it was the anniversary of the Canal du Nord attack in 1918 as part of the 100 Days. There's fascinating maps from that have been digitized, and I've seen the originals too in my hands, which is very cool. But yeah, it's great to see those. So if you do want to support the channel and get all those extras and stuff like that, it's very much appreciated. It's only, you can do like, what's it, $350 Canadian a month would be hugely helpful. So thank you. Well, I just want to say hi to Susan because she's driving. Thank you, Susan. I appreciate the birthday wishes. Yeah, hotel Wi-Fi sucks. Yeah, I hear that. Yeah, not always the best. Hits and misses, I find in myself. Okay, so we got some stuff here. I just want to pass along. So I find from Kevin, who supported the channel, thank you. I find the arguments about Market Garden disregard the necessity of clearing the shelves. I agree. I mean, that's a big one. I think that just kind of gets forgotten in a lot of ways when it comes to Market Garden, right? Wanting to get across, well, all of those water barriers. So always talk about getting across the Rhine, like getting across the rest of them, like was a given, which it wasn't. You still need to supply those troops, and where are you going to get those supplies from? Right? They still have to come through Normandy, which is a gigantic pain, so far away. Using what they have for limited logistics as it is, it's difficult. So I think all of a sudden saying we now have this toehold, whether they're pushing to the North Sea or into the Rhine, or sorry, into the Ruhr or whatever you may think was the ultimate objective of Market Garden, which is never made clear, by the way. I don't think there's any clear document that says this is the point. I haven't seen it. I went looking years ago and haven't seen it. So if you have seen it, I'd love to see it. But yeah, it's a fascinating way to look at it, right? Because how do you supply these troops that get this toehold, right? If all goes well, then what? Do we just keep coming from Normandy, and do we push now west, right? Because 30 Corps has basically made this huge bulge into the line. Is that it? Like, I know I've never had an answer to that. So, I mean, and people like to focus on, the Americans should have done XYZ, or the Brits should have done XYZ, or second lifts and all this stuff. And I'm like, well, at the end of the day, you can be 100% successful. If you can't supply the troops, it doesn't really mean anything. They could have been cut off later too without supplies. Anyway, I agree, Kevin. It just leaves a huge hole in these ideas. And I mean, it's kind of a cliche that isn't always necessarily true, but what is it? Amateurs always talk tactics, and professionals focus on logistics, that kind of thing. I mean, obviously both are very important to conducting warfare, but it's all nice and good, especially in modern warfare. If you have no bullets, it doesn't matter, right? You can be as tough as nails, and you're going to do bayonet artillery that can take you out from miles away. It just doesn't really matter. So yeah, it's an important part of this. Yeah, that's great, Andreas. You got to go to the sites and everything. Jealous. This is one area I haven't been to. Been to most of them. This is the one that I'm pretty much missing, and into the northern Netherlands as well. Hopefully one day. Hi, thank you for the comments. Can I go into more depth why you dislike Anthony Beaver? You mentioned briefly in the WAF and SS Crime. Oh, commodity Livestream. You know, I'm not a big fan. I'm not going to lie. I used to be. I thought he was doing good, like a service generally, I guess, to history and having general histories and things like that. And then when I really started the PhD and things like getting into, you know, use of sources and what sources mean and all of that stuff. If you go through those big books of his, it's all secondary sources. So in my mind, that's not bringing anything new to the table. I don't like some of his conclusions about other things. He takes tons of evidence at face value that have come from secondary sources. Like I've literally followed this stuff back through other sources, and he would just believe them because it's printed in a book. And I will. One of them is about Khan. I can't remember what it was exactly, but there's a book that's called Khan. It's from the 70s, I believe. I just got a copy of it used, and it was available online, but I saw it for cheap. I thought it was easier in the future just to have it. So I checked out, you know, the citation that he puts. I checked literally that page, and it doesn't follow back. It was just a conversation with one soldier that was in a private collection of that, like of the author of the other book, and you can't do anything with that. I can't check that. I can't look at it. So to me, that's a major issue is relying on things that might not necessarily be true, and a lot of sensationalism. There's a lot of that. I'm just not a fan of that type of history. You can do general histories, and you know that's great. But if you're just going to keep repeating what everyone else is saying without bringing anything new to this, what's the point? We have tons of general histories. We don't need any more. And this is all he does, just popular topics and just kind of repeats the process. So not a fan of that type of writing. Hopefully that answers your question. Yeah, I do want to get Prit on the channel. I do need to do that. Yeah, I do. I got to touch base with him again. Yeah, I mean, that's another point. The logistics alone of Sea Lion, I don't think ever would have worked. I mean, for those of you who are Europeans or have been to Europe, you can see those river barges. They're everywhere. That's what they were going to use to cross the channel. That makes me just queasy, and I don't get seasick. But it's just so like, huh? With the Royal Navy still intact, and they didn't take up the area. Right, we all know that. Battle of the Bulge. Or sorry, Battle of Britain. Battle of the Bulge. 44 in the brain. It's like I just don't see how that goes. Like it does not make sense. Like they just would have been ripped to shreds or swamped before they even get within sight of the coast. So I don't know. It's the logistic part of this is fascinating, and that's another thing I've thought about is because it's hard to prove, and it's not typically how I do the history, but you know about inevitabilities and all that stuff, but you see a lot about, you know, what if the Germans had won D-Day, and what if the Germans had kicked the Allies out of Normandy, and blah, 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 you know, for obvious, I think, reasons for the sensationalism and for a lot of people who want that to be a thing in some ways and whatever. I've discussed this stuff about wereaboos and SS fanboys and stuff like that. I've been kind of batting around an idea maybe of, you know, a video of Normandy was impossible for it to fail. How? I don't see how that could have failed. The amount of logistics, the amount of planning, the amount of backups to the backups that went into this thing, right? They hit them with 5 beaches, right? If all of 4 had failed, they still could have done it, right? It's absolutely mind-blowing, the logistics and the support they put into Overlord. I mean, they had been planning it for years, and people think this somehow is going to fail because of a couple divisions. Like it doesn't make any sense. And then also the southern coast was wide open anyway. So, but that's Dragoon and a whole other thing. But it's just something to think about in terms of how do you get these broader concepts across without, you know, resorting to cliches and doing the same old. But that's just something I've kind of been batting around. Yeah, I mean, that's my sense too. Sorry, I just got back from walking the dog, and it's still warm here in Ottawa in October. Yeah, I mean, that is my sense, is to get around the west wall, reduce casualties, open, break into the North German plain, right? That's how I understand it. And then you can, do a right wheel and then hit the Ruhr. But some people think it was to cut off the 15th Army, which I've literally never seen any evidence of, right? There's been literally zero evidence of that in the planning documents that I saw. So that's just an assumption people are making, and reducing the casualties. I think that's a post facto justification in some ways, which is what Monty was known for doing, saying, "Oh yeah, we got to get around the west wall. It's this bad." I mean, yeah, things go bad in some spots of the west wall, and they're still doing a hook on it anyway, right? First Canadian Army's doing the hook. Second British Army's involved in that. So, I mean, 21st Army Group, that's what they're doing. So, I mean, it's part of it, I think, but I mean, I just don't see the documents. So you have to have some skepticism without them, unless there's something that says it directly. I would love to see that, though. Anything on Market Gardens, planning after those, it changes from, what is it, Comet and the other one. The name escaping me in the moment. But yeah, it's something I did that video on Market Garden, and I dug into planning documents from 21st Army Group, from the Airborne Army, which was really fascinating to look at because it's such a short period for those guys, all the way down to divisional levels, there's just chock full of stuff because the Americans have digitized so much, which is fantastic. Yeah, I mean, same. I agree, Andreas, 100%. It just takes this modern necessity of warfare, of industrialized conflict, and just throws it out the window. Like somehow getting one airborne division and parts of an armored division across the Rhine is somehow going to fix all this. I don't see how, really. I mean, yeah, maybe it reduces some casualties in the Scheldt, maybe. I don't know. We don't know, right? It's all a what if. But it's just unbelievable that there's people who will argue, that, it's not part of it. And I don't get it. So that's why I've said in numerous videos, and in the new reaction video that'll be coming out next week, it's just people get so emotional about Market Garden. They get like nasty. I literally said that in the video. You get so nasty to other people and will insult intelligence and appearance, and all because of Market Garden, either pro or anti-Monty. Usually it's what it usually comes down to. So it's crazy. Yeah, that's a fascinating one. I mean, it's minor, right? In a lot of ways. I mean, maybe I could do something maybe short. There's some footage, which is kind of cool. Mostly of Vladivostok, so there's no fighting. The Canadians do fight against the Red Army, though, which is fascinating. I mean, it's a small action. I think they're based out of Murmansk or Archangel. I can't remember off the top of my head. In the northwest there, not all the way out east. And they're engaged, right? There's an artillery battery and an infantry battalion are fighting. I think there's cavalry involved, too. Could be mistaken. Anyway, it's often briefly discussed in like overall histories of the Canadian Expeditionary Force, because it's technically part of the Canadian Expeditionary Force. It's literally called CEF Siberia usually, or Russia, or something along those lines. So it's a fascinating one, and there's conscripts there, which is a whole other level, right? We know with stuff of conscripts in the First World War is literally a violent thing, right? It almost literally leads to Canadians shooting at each other in the streets. And almost a civil war in a lot of ways. So yeah, it's something I could look at. I don't think I could do too much, just because the same thing I talk about all the time, but the same YouTube struggle, right, is where do I spend the time? Where do I put the limited time I can into the channel, versus, topics I would love to do, but I know nobody will watch other than you guys, the diehards, which I appreciate so much. People won't watch it. So I'm not sure how well that would do, but I mean, we had the live stream talking about overall the Allied intervention in the war. So I mean, that's like a first step. So maybe in the future, but definitely something I have thought about, because I did some digging on this stuff a while back. So Yeah, looking at some of the Canadians that were actually killed there. So it's an interesting topic for sure. I mean, there's other countries involved too, right? Like Japan's there for years, which is fascinating, especially with what comes later. Yeah, it's he's wrong about a lot because he just goes off of what people say, which is a whole other issue in the history field that I have that no one seems to be doing anything about. Yeah, also that, right? When is that first-hand account from? Is it from the battle, after the battle? Is it written during the battle? Because that does happen. Or is it from 50 years later? That doesn't really count really anymore. Right? We have so many of these recollections of such controversial things in war, like killing POWs. That comes up on my channel a lot because some of those are the most popular videos because people love the shock of it all. It comes up all the time, and they say, oh, this guy said this, and then I'll look it up, and it's from an interview 50, 60 years later. And I go, okay, he said that, but that's all well and good. I can barely remember what happened last week in detail, but you can remember that. No, 66 decades later. Okay. And that's another controversial thing with the field is taking veterans' word for it. That no matter what, as long as they say it, it's true, which is not the case. It's just not how that works, right? First-hand accounts can be unreliable. You have to know the context of them first, which a lot of those, I'll call them pop historians, don't do. Doesn't matter. Yeah. Yeah, finally, yeah, the Sharp End. Those two volumes from Tim Cook, Sharp End and Shock Troops are, to me, a must-have, a must-read if you are interested. And it's a must-read if you're interested in Canada in the First World War, or Canada generally, military history, or Canada even the Second World War. You need to understand Canada in the First World War to understand why Canada does what it does in the Second World War. To me, they're inexplicably linked. I don't see them as one continuous conflict. I think that misses a bit. Obviously, they're linked, but Canada's responses are completely connected in how they go about doing pretty much everything. So it's a great way to look at that. And Tim's a fantastic researcher and obviously writer. So it's gripping and engaging. I mean, Shock Troops is one of the reasons I did a PhD on this path, is because I could learn, I learned that you could do both. You can research the crap out of something and still make it super engaging. So that is, one of the books I credit with putting me on this path again towards what I'm trying to do here. So it's a great book. I can't say enough about Tim. He's such a good guy too. Just such a great guy. Maybe. I don't know if I go that far. The Middle East fighting. I mean, when's that not been the case? There's always someone fighting in the Middle East. That never stops. Oh, nice. Yeah, it's so expensive to get this stuff across the ocean. Yeah, I didn't even think of that. I should have brought one with me when I came. I could have brought one for you. I can got it for nothing. Usually, I can go to a used bookstore here in Canada. They're all over the place. They cost like $8. So, yeah, I didn't even think of that. Hello. Our resident Operation Veritable, Dermot here. And psychology. Actually, I want to talk to you. I'll send you an email. I didn't respond to your last one. I apologize. It's been busy. But I want to talk about some veritable stuff maybe for the spring. Yeah, jumping back into Market Garden. Yes, there's pressure from Marshall, the American Chiefs of Staff, and like high as up as can be, to use it on Eisenhower. That's part of it, obviously. I think that's something going on there. It's this idea, if you spend all these resources, you better use them. I don't always agree with that, but that is a thinking of people involved, so that cannot be discounted. Oh, okay. Ham, about 100 kilometers north of the Ruhr. Oh, okay. Can I see those? If you have them, I'd love to see them. Or you can point me where to find them. That would be awesome. Because so many people also give Monty a pass because he's not involved in the nitty-gritty. I mean, it's his idea, but after he gives it off to Brereton, he's just like dismissed of responsibility, which I think is interesting, but I don't appreciate that for any leader at any point. But I would love to see that if you have them. Yeah, they were definitely. That's a good one, Kevin. Actually, I should look that up. That's a good point. That's a good way to put it. You have this resource that you've literally put, into an army, the army structure, and it's not being used for anything else. It's specialized. I mean, that's kind of why it gets plugged into the bulge, because they have nobody else. These guys are waiting for the next op for some, which never comes, right? There's never, some of them don't ever jump again after Market Garden. So it's fascinating that's yeah, it's definitely part of this, right? And Eisenhower is part of it, Monty's part of it, Marshall's part of it, even Allenbrook is part of this, right? They're all involved in the structure and the strategy, right? That broad front that they were doing until they stopped doing it for a brief period. Yeah, we could talk about Market Garden forever. People will talk about it forever. And the Germans leave easily. Yeah, whenever did they? Yeah, they don't. They're going to hold on to that ground, right? An important ground. They do that numerous times. So, as we know, and that's one of the points I brought up in the reaction video is how difficult the fighting was. Because the terrain allows the defender to do that. But just the conditions also were so bad. And because I've been to those areas in the Rhineland, I think that's a good comparison to the Scheldt because it's waterlogged, it's wet, it's cold for most of it. Temperatures are going up for Veritable and Blockbuster. But that's German territory, so they're fighting hard for it. And some guys said the Scheldt was even worse, because some of these guys are doing both, right? Because there's only a limited number of Canadians involved, and they keep plugging them in. So to me, it's an interesting way to look at it. And again, as you guys know, I don't speak German, but I'm trying to access some sources on this stuff and see what they have to say. Because I mean, it's got to be miserable for them too. Especially at Walker, they flooded that thing and they're stuck in these high grounds. I mean, I'm sure it was awful for them too, trying and hold on to what little chunks of land there were. And they definitely weren't just going to give it up for nothing. Yeah, I mean, I think I agree, James, and that's one of the things I like to argue about Market Garden and in general. Even in the push to Antwerp, I'm not saying they shouldn't have done it. What I'm saying is, what do they call it? Victory disease. You keep succeeding, right? There's a slugging match in Normandy for most of it, or towards the end, really. You have to hammer blow your way out, and all of a sudden, boom, you think you're going to win the war now. You can push all the way to Berlin. Because they're not really stopping. There's rear guards and larger rear guard actions and things at the Sand and the Somme and a few places, even some First World War battlefields, right? Deep and around that area, which is fascinating. Right, Men Gate takes damage from the Second World War, but then they stop and they think, okay, we can easily push them aside now, and that was, I think that's hubris. I agree, hubris. All of it, and I think that goes into parts too, like Herget Forest and all of that. I mean, it's hard to prove this stuff, but you can usually piece this together from documents and writings and things like that. And I've seen them, definitely see it in the planning docs for Market Garden, and the corollary to that is obviously the Channel Ports. I mean, it's a sideshow and literally in many ways. I mean, First Canadian Army is literally strung out, doing the map in my head, between Boulogne and Calais, way in France, and then the rest of them are up around Antwerp. They're literally strung out all this way, and they're being told you got to take these ports because we need them, and all of them were blown to pieces, so they weren't really useful for ports for quite some time. And they're small harbors to begin with. Dunkirk never falls, right? It doesn't fall till the war's over. So I think there's this hubris involved in how they think they can get this stuff done. And it's just not how you should do it, because that's not how they had success in the past. I tend to think of it as they wanted the victory on cheap. Of course, that's what you want when there's human lives at stake. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But sometimes that doesn't work, right? There's a reason why it didn't work before that, and all of a sudden you change your strategy and have such success, and all of a sudden you're going to go back to the way that didn't work. I mean, that's just a general lesson, I think, overall for many things. That's not just necessarily military operations. That can be applied to a lot of stuff. So that's just my thinking. Yeah, technically, yes. So sorry, the Czech army unit that's fighting with the Allies. Yes, technically they are under command of First Canadian Army as they're screening off Dunkirk. I think it was one of the, I can't remember who was, maybe the Lowland Division, 52nd, maybe. I was just reading this the other day. One of the British units was given the job, and then they bring them up. I think it was the Lowland. They bring them up. Sorry, 1 second. Nothing. Don't worry about it. The Lowland Division comes up and joins the rest. So I think that's when they get brought in. They're an armored division, so they just screen it off. But yes, technically they are attached to 1st Canadian Army, just like the Poles. They're smaller, though. I think they're a brigade, if I remember correctly. I don't think they're at full divisional status. Thanks, Bruce. I appreciate that. That's good. That's funny. That's good. Oh, wait, what? Win the Zulu Wars? I have no idea what that means. Okay. Yeah, it was a brigade. Yeah, 1 corps. Yeah, so that would make sense. Yeah. Yes, hit the like button. Thank you, everybody. Winter is coming. Winter is always coming, just like in the show. But it's always coming. And that winter of 44, 45 was one of the worst. And it was just awful. Hey, Pete, thanks for coming and hanging out. Yes. Hey, Colin. Haven't seen Colin in a while. What's up? Yeah, Genoa Beach Tender tends to have them all. For some, yeah, Andres, I think you said that before. They only had volume 2 for some reason. Maybe they just sold out. I don't know. Yeah, they had a few Tim Cook books when I was there, but that was way back in April now. So I can't really, I don't know how they do the stock there. I don't know how it rotates or whatever. But yeah, best way is to get a Canadian or to North American and bring it across for you if you have a hookup with somebody coming over. I mean, sorry, just reading the response here. Yeah, oh yeah, loads of veritable stuff. I know I could talk about veritable forever. I think you and me are probably some of the few people on the planet who actually care that much in depth about it or really want to dig into it. I'm sure the people here would love to hear that. Yeah, career biography is interesting. Very interesting. Is there any juice in the show? Yeah, I think so. They did not get along at all. Like Crear and Monty for. I mean, I have my thoughts on the subject. I mean, I've seen Crear's letters. He doesn't really talk to Monty much. There's orders, obviously, like the whole Dieppe thing, which I did a very short video on it, right? You know, the liberation of Dieppe. Monty wants Crear to attend a meeting in person for an operation that doesn't even involve 1st Canadian Army. For some reason, I think he, as we know, he did not think well, Monty, of people that he considered lower than himself, class-based usually, and I think that's how he thought of Crear, or a lot of the Canadians, quote unquote, because he loved Simmons, but Simmons was British by birth, so I don't know how much that comes into play. But if you got stuff, I'm game. I will look at it both. I mean, we can dig into this. I've looked at Crear's papers a lot for the Hong Kong stuff that I did. There's some interesting stuff in there, what people accuse him of, and basically of being a Brit lover for no reason, for, no, despite whatever, as a career opportunist, which he was, but that's also not the case. Him and Monty didn't get along, I think, a lot of reasons because of that, because he didn't always just do what the Brits said. So it's an interesting, there are 2 interesting figures to me. I mean, Monty always gets attention, Crear hardly at all, but I'm game for it, especially with Veritable. That's another slug match. Yeah, that's a good point, Pat. Actually, if you want to take that back, is airborne. Yeah, it's specialized. When do you use it? Timing is huge. Context is huge. But if you don't do it at the right time, it could all be for naught. And I think, yeah, using the old guard is a perfect example. I don't know. I think you're probably talking about Waterloo, but I'm not an expert on Waterloo. I don't know if it would have mattered as much. They were literally getting sandwiched between two forces. But anyway, it's neither here nor there. But I get your point. I completely agree. Yeah, I think it's Market Garden's going to divide opinion long after most of us here have shuffled off. I think it's going to be those ones that goes forever. Said that in the reaction video I did. People will get so upset and so worked up, and because I think there's a nationality thing in there. People take it, any affront if you're British against Monty or any British unit as affront to Britain. Same with the Americans. I mean, I don't know. I haven't spoken to any polls about this, but I would love to know if it does, if that carries over. I don't know. I think there's obviously a nationalism part of this. There's all kinds of things involved. And I mean, it's a failure. And I've talked about why, people love discussing failures. So they're literally angry or insulting people or threatening people. And nobody does this with the victories, though. In some cases, a lot of the cases. So, I mean, nobody's going to get all worked up over varsity. That doesn't happen. No one gets worked up over Operation Varsity. So, I don't know. No idea. Well, thanks for hanging out. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I'll come back to you, Andres, in a second. But yeah. Oh, normally we already talked about the Sheld. I guess we could come back around. But yeah, that is wild. That's crazy. I mean, sorry, I'm just wrapping my head around the distance. How many hundreds of kilometers that is, even miles. That's wild. Like, that's the length of France. That's just absolutely crazy that they stretch them like that. And I get why. I do, but I know there's no point in rehashing. But very interesting. Oh, thank you, Norma. I appreciate it. Appreciate the birthday wishes. I don't know. It's a brigade level. It's an armor brigade, so it'll be less because I think it's organized on British lines. I don't know. I've never seen any documents about it specifically. It's just usually a passing mention, which is unfortunate. But it's something I think deserves more looking into with these nationalities that get attached, particularly the 1st Canadian Army. Right, you got Poles, Czechs, Belgians are involved. I don't think there's any French units. Dutch units are involved, get attached to 1st Canadian Army. Yeah, there's a whole bunch. It's really, really interesting. And also how 1st Canadian Army is this multinational army in so many ways. And it's called 1st Canadian Army for largely political reasons. I mean, it maintains that name for political reasons, but I don't know. I think it is more of a broad representative. And Americans, sorry, there's also Americans attached to 1st Canadian Army as well. Technically, I think 101st is technically attached to 1st Canadian Army for like a week, something like that, when they do the switch at Nijmegen. It's not very long, but technically, the vaulted 101st is under the lowly Canadians, which I think is hilarious. Oh, thanks, Pete. Yes, more time for reading in the winter, definitely, Andreas. I completely agree. Yeah, completely agree. Yeah, I haven't, like I said, we discussed. I haven't been to the new one, but I know it's hard to get, as you know, it's hard to get stuff across the Atlantic, but they have Canadians coming there all the time. I don't know why they couldn't just throw a bunch of books in a box or something. This is our opportunity. Well, here we go again. Canadians not doing enough to tell our own stories, but yeah. Simmons was a SigFig. Yes. Yeah, I mean, he's not the only one. He's definitely not the only one. I can't remember who, but it was some low level. I think it was Colonial Office officials, and because I was at the Churchill Archive at Cambridge, and they're literally saying this to each other about the Canadians, how they're literally colonials, how they can't handle this stuff by themselves. They're talking about something minor, some diplomatic thing, and they're like, they need us because they can't do it themselves. This was like 36, which is just absolutely wild. That they still viewed Canadians as like, they don't know how to get dressed by themselves. So it just continues on, and I think so much of this, and I've said this before, that whole myth about this Canadian identity being built at Vimy Ridge and after, and First World War is this war of whatever you want to call it, because I don't think any of it's true. Independence, national identity. It doesn't come true because so many people see themselves as Brits, and then they're getting treated like this still, even after the war, and they're like, okay, we're done, we're out. Like, this is, Canadian identity changes in 45, not 1745. So that's me, but that's like an academic book for somebody else to do, not me. Oh, that's an excellent question, Meddy. Oh, geez. Infighting over doctrine, operational planning, a lot. Monty and Eisenhower at loggerheads, a lot, particularly, autumn 44. Massive issues there with how to do this, right? Do you continue the broad front, keep pushing across all? Do you do that, precision strike with Market Garden? If that works, do we keep doing that? I mean, there are doctrinal differences obviously in the armies, right? The Canadians are following British doctrine pretty much verbatim. In some cases it's different, but minor details. So the Americans have different concepts, and I mean, I don't know, can't think of anything specific off the top of my head, but there's a lot of personality clash going on. I think the Monty Patton thing's overblown, but I do think Eisenhower was the right person for the job of managing all these personalities. I think that's what made him such a good politician as well, is he could do that, because not everybody can do that. And obviously he was hugely popular after the war, because literally both parties wanted him to run for them in the election that he won, which is fascinating. Anyway, I think that's a big part of this, that was what Eisenhower was good at, and that's something lots of people talk about it, but we need to always keep in mind is there's an organizer at the top and all that good stuff. But yeah, overall, I don't think there's massive argument over broad strategy specifically, especially after Market Garden, right? They know what they need to do. Winter is going to cause some issues, right? We know that with the bulge, that causes the Germans limited success. Very limited success, I would argue. It's not really much of a bulge. It doesn't really last all that long. But yeah, it's just hold the front and keep pushing. And that's not the most sophisticated strategy, but it worked. So. Oh, yeah. I mean, this stuff is like soap opera-y, People, the infighting, the backstabbing, the nasty letters of people behind their backs, and things like Alan Brooks famously has his diary, right? There's stuff in there about McNaughton, and he's an idiot, but I'm gonna meet him for lunch. There's those fascinate me. Couillard's letters are, I think he's a more complicated person than people allow him. For those who look at him, which isn't many people, they see him as this kind of one-dimensional, career-focused individual, do anything to get as highly promoted as possible. I think that's not accurate. I think he's more complicated than that. But yeah, you got that going on with Couillard, and Couillard did try to push McNaughton out. There's no doubt about it. He talks about this indirectly in a lot of his writings, in letters and stuff, which is fascinating. And he was friends with Alan Brooke from back in the day, but so was McNaughton. So yeah, and then you have down to the general level and all the people that didn't get along at there, and the whole permanent force versus militia divide. And man, I wish there was more time for all this stuff, and interest, but it just doesn't exist. Yeah, Nope, bye, Dermot. That was a while ago, but see ya. Yeah, they did. I mean, they're still, well, I think we did discussion before. Name a airborne operation that doesn't have high casualties. Generally, anymore. I think there were some examples in Indo-Pakistan War in the 70s, where there's some airborne ops with not high casualties, but the rest are very high casualties. And varsity's no different. Huge number of casualties. Successful, but casualties. Oh, that's good to know. Yeah, I'm not surprised, particularly given the movie. Yeah. Enough blame to go. Yeah, well, that's what I try to argue, and people probably don't listen to me because I'm a Canadian, and we have no skin in the game, which doesn't make sense. Everyone's to blame for that one falling apart, every level. But that's not how history works now, is it? Yeah, also true. If market doesn't have it, why didn't you do it? Yeah, good point. Oh, yeah, that's a good point, actually. The regimental system, which we have here too. Wild. Sorry, I'm just trying to catch up. Oh, thanks, Shawn. I appreciate the birthday wishes. Yeah, I know the French are Third Army. But I was thinking First Canadian Army. I don't think there's any French units attached at any point. I don't think so. It was wild. Like, the amount of trucks, that are involved, the amount of maintenance that goes into keeping them moving, and the fuel that you have to use to get them to, the destination, to move fuel, to keep the armies moving. This is why the logistics part should be number one. And a lot of that's people just don't understand. They just don't want to wrap their head around it. They want to argue about the taking of this bridge by this hour and all that good stuff. So it's the same old, really. Yes, yeah. It's, well, so many heartbreaking stories with the uprising. Absolutely heartbreaking with those stories and what happens and the more death that follows. But yeah, those I've looked into a couple, not as much as I'd like, but it's the good stuff has been done. So, okay, I can talk about this very briefly. Okay, so my thoughts on the book. I have it back there somewhere. I haven't read it in detail. Like, I've flipped through and taken some points and looked at some claims people make, and then like they'll say somebody said this, and then like Foster the general specifically, and then I look it up, and it usually doesn't mean what they think it means, that kind of thing. I'm not a fan, and I haven't done any digging on this, but as far as I know, and I've heard this from very reputable historians, some of which have been on the channel, that Tony Foster is the one who wrote the book, because his father is General Foster. He hated his father. So you have this hatred of his father coming into this book, which ends up him taking the side of the SS. Like, how much does he hate the guy? Like, that's just bonkers. And it's this huge book. You can see it behind me there, right? Nope, wrong way. Right there. Like, it's huge. Like, it's massive. Like, I don't want to. It's hard to want to sit there and dig through this, I don't know, personal grievance that takes on this issue with the SS. I mean, it's painful, and it's not even that well written. So it's a painful one to read, in my opinion. One day, I guess. Ooh, I like this question. Walk the ground. Yeah, I'd love to see other people's answers. But yeah, I think of why I just saw Andreas' answer. Peleliu. That's the one I'd love to go to. Love to go to Peleliu. I'm just fascinated by that battle. I don't know why. I can't explain why. I just am. I'd love to see that. I think going to Palau itself would be awesome. I mean, it just looks like a very nice place to go that I would love to see. So I think Peleliu is definitely up there. Some parts in Italy as well. I'd like to see. I mean, I went by them on a train, a chunk of them. I mean, the The Leary Valley is one I'd love to dig into more. Literally went through it, on a 200 kilometer train in a day. And I'd love to dig into the Leary Valley because it's a beautiful place. There's that, and there's the Italian food, and the Italian people are so nice in my experience, especially in the smaller areas. Because I went to Ortona, which was awesome, and they were so nice there. Yeah, I think that's like the two for now would be Leary Valley and Paleo. Yeah, I've been to all the other ones I would have answered years ago. I've been some twice. Yeah, LLMA would be cool to see. Yeah, Iwo Jima, that's another one. Like herding cats. Yeah. Yeah. Ooh, this is a good question. 1 second. So technically, yes. Technically. Practically, no. Not going to happen. They could have stayed neutral like Ireland did. They had complete control of their own foreign policy. That's why you have the declaration of war a week later for all kinds of reasons. It's become more complicated than people will allow for just so many reasons. And Mackenzie King is one of them because that dude was crazy in a good way a lot of the times. I mean, he did lead Canada pretty well, I argue. Anyway, so no, practically speaking, no. Because the English Canadian population at the time, like I said earlier, still heavily identifies as British, right? You don't have Canadian citizenship literally until the 20s. So these people remember these times, or they were not that old, and they still see themselves as connected to Britain, Britain proper, not even Empire, Britain. So of course they're going to go to war. Quebec and parts of French-speaking Canada are a little different. I mean, they're not a homogenous group by any means. But people like to think they are for generalities and writing books. They're not even close to being a homogenous group because they're spread out all across the country, not just Quebec. They're a small part of the population, though, but they hold a lot of seats in the parliament. Was important for King to stay prime minister, which is all he ever had in his life, is my argument, and that's why he fought so hard to keep it. That's all he ever really had, that and his dogs. So, I mean, no, the English population would have had him booted out of office if he hadn't declared war. And the Conservatives would have brought Canada into the war ASAP. So, no, there's, long story short, no, there's no real choice. They're going to war. They were already planning for it anyway. They start to mobilize in August. So they were at war anyway, just not literally or legally. He doesn't talk about Ipswich that much, does he? Alamo, yeah, that'd be cool to see. Okay, so I know you guys are talking on the sidebar. Love it. So there's one thing I did want to discuss because I said I would. So I think it was a couple days ago or last week. I don't remember exactly. I just tweeted out, I had a conversation with somebody, might have been earlier this week, who's also, in the military history field in Canada, not doing Canadian stuff, but in Canada in general, and just talking about the state of the field. And I think the more I go along, the more I see, the more people I talk to, the more I'm worried about the field in general. I don't think Canadian or military history in Canada, because it's not the same as Canadian military history, because there's people outside the country doing excellent work on Canadian military history. There's some doing awful work, but there are some doing really good work. I don't know how long the field has in any way, in any strength. Yeah, it's not going to go away. That's not going to happen. In my opinion, I don't think it's going to go well much longer. I see things like university departments collapsing, no one wanting to focus on this anymore, literally keeping people out who study this stuff, centers changing their focus from military history to not that anymore. Those who know what I'm talking about know what I'm talking about, and I don't want to say anything on the air. We can do it offline sometime. If you want to know what I'm talking about, there's some other centers at universities that are tiny and I think are shrinking. I don't know exactly, but I haven't heard much from them recently. And I mean, last couple of years. I mean, I was an academic and went through all this stuff, and I'm not optimistic. I know I've been very pessimistic lately. I still am. It's just very pessimistic, the state of the field. I mean, we were discussing all these great things, and I just, in my back of my mind, it's always, no one's ever going to talk about this. No one's ever going to look at this. No one's ever going to write on this. We'll never get anybody to do this stuff. It's just not going to happen. I mean, we can talk on sidebars and chat, in which you guys know I love doing, and it's one of my favorite things, but it's just not going to progress the field in that way. And I'm not saying these people you have to be an academic to do this stuff. I mean, you can learn history on the fly, and a lot of people do, and they're doing excellent work with it. I know them. I know people. There are people here who are doing it, who are watching right now, or being part of the discussion. We're doing it. My point overall is just there's no broad Peel support here. None. I talk about things and people have no idea what I'm talking about. Not a clue. Like, just generally, if you do this in like the States, if I said Iwo Jima, people are going to know what I'm talking about. Broadly speaking, they'll have an idea of what that means. And if you said we're going to close, I don't know, pick like a museum, they would fight tooth and nail to keep that thing open. Here, I don't think so. Like, say if the War Museum were to close, or they say, hey, we're going to close this down, it's not going to. It's not going anywhere. Not for a while anyway. Like, say if we're cutting the funding and that's it, you're done. I don't know if there would be anything to try and keep it going. I don't see that happening in that broad Peel. I just don't get a sense that that's going to happen. The government doesn't want to support it directly. I know this. I see it. I know people who are in doing this stuff. It's just not getting the support it needs. So I have a very pessimistic outlook on the state of military history in Canada, how it's going to go. I don't think it's going to last much longer in any real way, shape, or form. I think we're going to let it go. And people are okay with that, which is the problem. That's what drives me crazy, is people just are okay with it because we buy into these myths in this country specifically that military is not as important as we think it is. We're not a quote-unquote warlike people. There's literally books titled this, Military History of an Unmilitary People. It's just never been true. That's just not true. Humans are humans. I don't care what your nationality is. You're still human. We have nasty traits. That's why we got here. I don't know how this is going to go. I think it's going to bite us in the butt. It already is. It is already biting us in the butt. We don't like spending money ever. I mean, Americans claim they're all anti-tax this, and yet look at their budgets for their militaries. If we do anything here, people lose their freaking minds. That have to do with the federal government specifically, which is just dumb. Nobody wants to spend any dollars, and we don't put enough into it. We're too small in our thinking. And I've said this before. We're always too small in our thinking, which is frustrating. As someone like me who can see where this is going to get us, it's not a good place. So, hopefully that answers the question for the person who asked that on Patreon. I just discussing with other people who won't even do like non-Canadian topics, say at a university. Good luck. Where are you going to do that? They're not hiring anyone in this field. There's no academic. There's less. Every time an academic military historian retires, they don't replace them. They just don't. They replace them with other people. Departments are full of infighting. Museums are focusing on other things, even ones that are military history. Ones are shuttering because there's just nobody to run them anymore. I have a very pessimistic outlook. I think our military history is going to be done by those outside the country like it's always been. And we're just dropping the ball again. Yeah, we have tons of great people doing great work. And they are helping, your Tim Cooks, your Mark Zilke's, Ted Barris. You have some big names that are doing some good work. David O'Keefe is able to get some broad appeal. I just don't think that's enough. I just don't think it's enough to keep this going for all kinds of reasons. And this is coming from people who told me too, like, they're like, we don't like your channel because it was Canadian. And I went, okay, well, there's nothing I can do. I took the Canadian out of the name. I don't think it's helped, but still the Canadian focus, obviously. But that's just what I'm thinking. So sorry if I went on too much of a thing there. I'll just go down. Yeah, there's a whole bunch here. So I'm going to go back where I was. Sorry, I'm way behind here. That's my thought. I can come back and answer some questions on that as we move along. I just wanted to make sure I got that covered. Very so this is about the declaration of war, I'm assuming. Very little dissent. There's literally some in Parliament. There's no actual vote. It's just a whatever they call it, verbal vote. I don't think the official name. There's no like count. There's only a few voices that dissent, like literally speak out. But broadly speaking, no, because the way King managed the war, and we've talked about that before. Oh, love Herbie. Yeah, Herbie should be. I mean, he's just as crazy. He does as many adventures. Yeah, I've heard that her work is excellent. So that's awesome. Yeah, that's a huge part of it. I mean, I do think the Americans spend too much. Sorry, you guys spend too much. We don't spend enough. There's a sweet spot, and people just, we won't get there. Sorry, I'm moving my way along here. Yes, they do. I knew somebody got into West Point, actually. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I haven't like picked. Sorry, this is back about Foster. I haven't like picked out the pieces of him like hating his father, but the people who told me this, I believe them because they are not sensationalists. They don't make stuff up. They are very good historians, and this book just drives them crazy. Nobody cared. That's not true in that sense. But no one. Oh, sorry. Is there something I missed? I think I just got a super chat. I'll get to that in a second. Sorry. But thank you for the support. I appreciate it. Very little. I mean, it's in the newspapers. You know, they're getting, because I've gone through, I don't know how many newspapers across country from the entirety of the war. Always trying to find something or someone. So I see a lot of them. They're aware of what's going on. Like they would know about like Bougainville and, you know, the Marianas and things like that. There's not a ton of interest in Canadians fighting in it. Hardly any, actually. There's a huge thing about, you know, volunteering to go to the Pacific. A lot of them troops know that that's just going to way to get them home possibly earlier because they think Japan's on the ropes. Anyway, so they just use an opportunity to get home. You know, so there's not a lot of support for it. There's not a broad-based support for continuing it. There's like, there will be like some saying, you know, we need to do more. Obviously, it never comes to that level, right? Because the war ends before they can switch over. But yeah, the focus is on Europe and Italy, is on Northwest and Italy, no question. The Pacific stuff gets attention, but not a ton, because the Canadian is very minor, right? There's squadrons involved. I'm not saying there's nothing. There's like one ship that's literally involved in combat, right? Which puts itself out of the war, which I still need to do a video on because it's crazy. But yeah, it's very minimal at best. Yep. Simply put, Colin, yes. The bone of contention is conscription, because in the First World War, it was a whole to-do. People were protesting in Quebec City, and they literally got shot at and killed. Some of them got killed because they were protesting against it, and it became violent. You know, that is a huge thing. And then King knows this. Well, King was no fan of conscription himself because it ripped apart his beloved Liberal Party, right? Because they form a union government during the First World War. with the pro-conscription liberals jumping ship to conservatives, basically. Not basically, that's what happened. And the good chunk, particularly the French liberals, French Canadian liberals, keep the party running, with a few people like King and a few others. But yeah, that's a massive part of this. And King masterfully handles conscription in the Second World War. I don't care. No one else will ever convince me otherwise. Like a political master class of what to do on anything that is unpleasant. It's like a playbook that everyone should be following. He just kept delaying and denying, and I mean, it's underhanded and harder to get away with in today's modern technology. But it's just, to me, it's perfect. You couldn't do it any better. But yeah, it's the long story short. Yes, that's that simple. Yeah, stolen from. Sorry, I had to bring stolen from. Well, I mean, France stole it first, I guess. Yeah, sort of. France didn't really want it back after the war. Anyway, funny. Sorry, I'm just trying to. Yeah, I know. I think. Yeah, I mean, you're one of the people doing history now, and it's not good. Yeah, it's shrinking everywhere, Colin. It's not good. And yeah, the focus on STEM is important. But if you just focus on STEM and don't do arts and give you context, it's not going to end well. It's just, you're just going to have other problems. You can have as many coders and engineers as you want. It's going to cause other problems. You'll just be replacing a problem. Why we can't balance, I don't know. I don't get it. I don't know why we're so against balancing. We just don't do it as well as we should. Yeah, I mean, this is what I'm struggling with right now. And I've talked about this before. And I luckily got lucky. I mean, over the late summer, I was talking about, what this is going to look like and, what OTD will be. And if I'm going to have to, pretty much shutter it down. Sorry, shutter it up. I got a reprieve, a very short reprieve into the new year, where I'm going to have to revisit that whole thing again. And it's not looking good. Not looking good at all. Oh, yay. Something we don't need. It's complicated, Andreas. It's hard to explain in a very quick manner. There's a lot going on in terms of what quote unquote Canadian identity is. Like I said earlier, and then we're not warlike. The whole idea, particularly towards the end of, especially the Cold War, is that Canada is a peacekeeping nation. This lasts into the 90s. This is what our military is for peacekeeping other people's conflicts, not being part of them, and humanitarian efforts. Canada mostly and it's getting worse with climate change, and abroad. That is how a lot of Canadians still see the military, even though Canada is hardly involved in any peacekeeping anymore. Afghanistan ripped the guts out of the Canadian military in more ways than one. And that was the longest war in Canadian history. Not even close. Went on for a very long time, obviously. So we just have this warped identity that doesn't fit any truth, but again, what national identity isn't based on myth? And it's just, there's not the broad-based support. It doesn't fit who we are, quote unquote, even though we have these things. We talk about Vimy Ridge, and that's pretty much it. Everything's Vimy this, Vimy that, and everything else is nobody knows. And I don't know. I don't know how to do anything. I'm trying, but I don't know what to do. Honestly, I have no idea. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Yeah, we have 40 million people, but we have population. We just don't have the political or popular will to do anything about it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know. Well, I'd be the first one in there loading up the truck with stuff. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I don't want to do this too much, but I just, how do I say this without sounding like a egotist? Other people are doing it in a lot of ways, and they're doing some good stuff, and they have some good ideas. what I mostly see is big names will do a video on Canada once a year, and then that's it. And then that's get the attention, and then that's the end of this. Like I literally can see this stuff in analytics, it's like YouTube, because that's what I know. I can literally see this stuff. Like I can put in a battle, a Canadian battle, and there's no Canadians that come up for it. It's channels that do these broad overviews. Again, they are doing good work in the way they do it. I mean, some of it's not so good. Like they focus, say, more on animation than they will on good history, or worrying about the backgrounds and all the superfluous stuff that I that I call it anyway, when the core should be the history. They don't focus on that. Like they just will say regiments' names wrong, or the simplest stuff that you can just Google. It would take 2 seconds to fix and learn. Like I do it all the time. I mispronounce stuff all the time, but I make an effort. My point is generally that we just don't do it. And then if someone like me doesn't keep doing it, who will? That's another thing I wrestle with all of this. If I don't do this, who will? People are doing it, but no one's doing it like I am. I'm trying to get into making it punchy, making it short, making it engaging. I'm not a filmmaker. I'm a historian first. I was trained as a historian. So I try to keep that at my core, but it doesn't seem to be the way forward. Everything else seems more important. The packaging, the animation, the surface history seems more important to people than history, the guts of it. So I don't know. I don't know. I guess I got into the new year to figure this stuff out, because I have a project into March that's helping me. So after that, I guess I'll have to revisit and see where we're at. But I don't know. I honestly don't know. Join the USA. You guys have tried to make us join the USA a couple times. We said no. More than once, and it didn't go well for you guys. Mostly government funding through the federal government. A lot of them are, well, they're run as corps, like crown corporations is what we have, right? With a government. Technically, they have stepped to the side, but they're still government funded. Without government funding, most of them disappear. That goes for a lot of Canadian things. Without the government propping them up, they'll disappear. We just get crushed by our neighbor next door. We can't compete numbers wise. It's just impossible. Oh, I appreciate that. Particularly out there. That's nice to know. Yeah. Yes, we have forgotten how to disagree politely on things like that. I know. It's hilarious. The Americans will never stop talking about it, and we can't get people to talk about it. Steve Pat, sorry if I missed you. Yeah, you're long gone. Yeah, I mean, the Americans talk about it nonstop. We never talk about it. I mean, maybe we're anti. It makes us not U.S. I don't know. Yeah, I did one World War I Canada course at U Ottawa. It was very well. The attendance was really good, and people signed up for it like immediately. It filled right up. I mean, it had its normal attrition that university courses often do, but it filled right up. And I don't, as far as I know, after that they never did one again. Maybe now, but it's been a year since I've checked. Yeah, we do. Yeah. No, I mean, you're right. I agree. I mean, it's all about narrative and climate and politics and one-upping each other and using it for nasty stuff and not treating people with respect anymore. Like, I mean, we should have ways to agree politely about things that deserve that type of conversation, but like base things like racism, like I think that is part of this. So that's why one of the reasons I try to push back as much as I can about these, neo-Nazis and loving the Nazi stuff, is because look what that opens up. If we just let that go, these are literally, we're preaching the murder of millions and then did it If we just let that go again, what world are we living in where we allow that? There's things like disagreeing about like policy and how, taxes and, cultural institutions and education and how that should be done. But you should be teaching, being allowed all people to be treated with basic respect. That's what we're losing. And this is what I try to do with some of my work, right? Is people aren't allowed to do that where they say, these people shouldn't exist. Like, not okay. That you can disagree with vehemently. Anyway, that's my rambling. Yeah, thank you for the super chat, David. I much appreciate it. Very helpful. Thank you. The lessons learned needed to be learned from not being a war. Yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about. We never do. We have never learned ever about being ready. It's the same thing playing out every time. Every time. We don't learn. I mean, we were sending the peacekeeping operations into things they were not ready for. It just never stops. We were sending troops into Cyprus. They were not ready. I mean, it's not even the big ones. It's the smaller ones as well. So we're never ready because that would require spending money. And we don't like doing that. Yeah. Yeah, there's that's quite a few number of Canadians. Sorry, no, I wasn't saying that there's none. And there's a lot. But you know what I mean? Like when you've got an army group, over in Europe, that's going to get the attention. A lot of ways, yeah. 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 In some ways, yes. Yep. Yeah, they tossed him in jail. I mean, there was a political element to that too. I mean, he was kind of a dick to begin with. And yeah, he was saying things that it wasn't just opposing conscription. It was like borderline, like not good, like supporting Vichy and things like that. It was not good. And he was a pain in the ass, so they threw him in jail. They let him out though, and he kept winning elections. So, yeah, not a lot of interest in Hong Kong, period. Unfortunately. Sorry, I'm not laughing at you, Ollie. I'm laughing at. I don't know. No idea. Good luck. What is it? The line they did a contest in this. I think it was around the centenary Confederation. In '67, it's the phrase, right? American is apple pie. I can't remember which one of the newspapers did that. One of the national ones, I think. And they said, Canadian as blank. And the winning response was Canadian as possible under the circumstances. That's a perfect answer because I don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody can define it. I've never seen a definition in my life that makes any sense that you can support. I have no idea. It used to be Britishness. That's long gone. And then even that didn't work because of the French population. No idea. So, sorry, 1 second. I'm getting a lot of random messages. So, I mean, I think about this a lot. And because I agree, like the country is changing. And it's the way it's going to go, whether you want it to or not. Like, it's just the way it is. People are going to come from areas they didn't used to come from, right? Canadian immigration policy literally kept people out who were not basically Western Europeans for a very long time. That is gone. I think it's a very good thing. But I mean, I get it. There's not that, familiar, family connection. But I don't think that's the only way in. I think there's more ways in. We need to broaden what Canadian military history is to do that. We don't do that. We won't. We refuse to do so. So, I mean, that is I think is the way forward. I agree. The education part is part of that. But I mean, broadly speaking, like when we talk about, Canadian military history, what does that mean? Like, I know it's still controversial to some people because he was basically a communist, but Norman Bethune is a way in for people. People in China know who he is. He's in Mao's writings, for Christ's sake. Yeah, communism, awful, Mao, terrible human being. But people know Bethune through that. Why we don't use that, I know why we don't. As the way in, I don't know. Because that's a way in. People are going to identify with that. Like same with the Spanish Civil War. Same thing. We could use that. We don't. We have monuments and stuff more than some other countries. But we still have these hang-ups from the Cold War that stop us from doing this. And it's just stupid. Yep. That gets completely people don't get that. The amount of Canadian troops and personnel and equipment in Western Europe for so long is just not even discussed. We put peacekeeping on our money, but for some reason, and why know why? Because it looks good. It's good PR. Stationing nuclear armed fighter planes in Western Europe quickly became something we didn't want to talk about anymore. Very quickly. Once that wall came down, it was over. Yeah, I mean, I agree, Colin. I do. I just don't know how good the history will be if people can't do this for work. Because I know I tried to do it, and I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think this goes both ways if you want to look at it as a left-right split. If you want, I don't think that really works in terms of all of this, but I do think it goes both ways. I mean, it's not even identity politics necessarily. It's just people get dug in, and then that's it. That's all that matters. And that's not good. Or people, like I said earlier, take up these awful positions and treat it like it's not terrible, and then we have to support that. And that's not something I agree with. But I agree, like the lack of dialogue and ways of moving forward are the way to do this. Not on the awful things. Like I'm not going to sit down and be like, so you're a neo-Nazi. What, what do you bring to the table? It'll be like, no, fuck off. I'm not involving you in this. Like that's where I draw a line. But if you're calling for the murder of millions, no. But other stuff, it's different, and we should talk. It used to be the case. Those days are gone, though. Hopefully they come back. Simple answer, Bruce. No. No. That's a good question. Good way to put it. No, I don't. I don't feel held to ransom and keeping this going. What am I saying? I just don't know how else it's going to get done. I don't know who else will do it. I don't know. I don't know how else to do it. I don't feel stuck. I feel if I don't do it, it's not going to get done in any way that's going to connect with people. I mean, I've literally, with a lot of help, obviously you guys mean the world to me, as I've said many times, and I genuinely mean it. I started this from nothing. I still have pretty much nothing. I don't have much. I have those letters behind my name, but in this day and age, it doesn't really count for much at all anymore. Really at all. Starting to think that was not the best decision to make, to do that degree. Anyway, because it doesn't seem to matter one way or another at all. I taught one course. Woohoo! Whoop-de-doo. I just don't know how else it's going to go forward. And in another way, and this is a personal way, I can't not do this, if this makes any sense. I don't know what else to do with myself. I've never been interested in anything else like this. I can't do anything else with my brain. I love sports, but I could never just do sports history, right? It was never for me. I don't know what else to do with myself. I've had other jobs and I hated them. I hated it. Fiery passion. completely awful, like life-threateningly awful. And this has never been that. So I don't know. It's not being held ransom. If I have to stop, I have to stop. But I don't know what a stop would be, and I don't know what else I would do personally, like what I want. But also, I still have to pay bills and stuff. So it's not a thing unless you're an organization that in Canada that's doing French and English to all other detriments. That's all that seems to matter. So I don't know. Yeah, yeah. General public does not like nuance at all, at all. Yeah, I mean, that's another thing too, right? Is try to do maybe less, spread it out. I don't know. It's so much work. Like to do it properly, as I see properly, is so much work for so little return in terms of anything, other than you guys who come to the live streams and stuff. It's not a huge group. It's just a ton of work, so much work to do it properly. It's not sustainable the way it is, unfortunately. But I don't know. I got lots of things to think about. I have some time, so I'm going to take advantage of it. Sorry, Colin. I don't know this. I've been rambling too long. I'm not sure what you're talking about for this. Sorry. Oh yeah, kids are crazy. They're always noisy. Yeah, we have that too here. Like the school groups, we have tourist groups coming here. Like especially the Canadian War Museum has always got like I don't know. I mean, I think this is a cultural thing. Like people come to Ottawa from because I think, and I've heard this people from there from China. There's a strong gambling culture there for whatever reason. I don't know why. They go to the casino across the river from us. They stop at the War Museum. That's what I mean. Like, this is what I was thinking about. Like, because I've literally heard tour groups all speaking Mandarin coming from China. They would know who Norman Bethune is, but we don't talk about him. His house is a National Historic Site, yes. People go to his house. They will come from China to go to his house where he grew up. We're not using the tools we have. The problem with the bread is that they go with what's popular. Yeah, I completely agree. I think you've hit the nail on the head here. Yeah, I can't put it any better. They just do the broad stuff that's popular, controversy, evidence be damned, really, or stretch it thin till it doesn't break. Yeah, it's frustrating. But again, thank you for the support. I do appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, lessons learned, prepared for war. I mean, yes, I mean that is true in a lot of ways, but I mean, I'm talking about like base levels. Like I'm talking about the most basic things. Like First World War, right? They weren't ready they didn't have proper boots. They had boots made of paper. You still need to wear boots. You still need to have something on your feet. That doesn't change. You know what I mean? It's crap like that. Or we sent the Canadian troops to Afghanistan and CAD patent green because we had no desert at all. Like we didn't think of a possibility of other places other than home defense. Like these are such just basic things that we just whatever. And this has been going on for over 100 years. So I don't know. I guess so. But that's the thing, right? Can identity be what you're not? Is that how it works? Yeah, you can define Irishness, but not as Canadian. Yeah. Oh yeah, in school, I did school in the 90s, and I hardly talk about anything. Other than those who were involved or had family members involved, I'd say hardly anyone. People don't even know we were in Germany. Yeah. People have no idea that we were there. Not a clue. Well, I appreciate that, James. I do. Yeah and no. I mean, my dad's from a pretty rural area, and he doesn't have any idea. He's from rural northern Ontario. I don't think he has any idea. He's French Canadian who doesn't speak French. I love throwing wrenches in. You know what I mean? Like, it's just he's a northern Ontario guy, lived between mostly Sault Ste. Marie and Thunder Bay and small communities in between, and is both parents were French speaking Canadians, and he doesn't speak French. What is he? What does that make me now? You know what I mean? And my mom's as English as they come, as waspy as they come. Like Mayflower coming over, leaving for not loyalist reasons, but around the same time, and continuing that for fighting in 1812 and all this stuff. It's I don't know. I'm just throwing wrenches in. I don't know. Yeah, I have. They don't do much. Their historical section is tiny. It's almost been slashed multiple times. I can't get even hired there because I don't speak French. So that's a big problem for me. I don't speak French at all. I tried. I'm not very good at it. And I'm just not good at acquiring new languages. Stuck in English. Yeah, it's done differently. It's done through federal departments, basically, and D&D is our Department of National Defense. Is not really how it does. I've had some support from regimental organizations and things like that, but those are separate technically, and there's just not a lot of money. It just doesn't exist, and a lot of them tend to like do their own thing. They don't like having outsiders doing it. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I know. I'm trying. It's not easy. The thing is, the 25,000 isn't really 25,000, if that makes any sense. I made the mistake back a couple of years ago, and it was still fresh at YouTube, and they really didn't know what they were doing with shorts. I had some shorts that did really, really well. Like they're still doing fairly well. There's multiples over 1 million. One's almost at 2 million views. However, people who watch shorts don't watch long form. And again, this is the crass business stuff, but I'm sure you know this too, is because you have your channel. Is the real, not even real, the way to make any sort of money or get any sort of support behind the algorithm is the long form. That I can't get off the ground still. I'm still only getting a couple hundred views on videos that people ask for or that are popular and they just go nowhere. I don't know if I'm not good enough. Like my videos are just not good enough. I think that's probably what it is. Because I can see other people do the same, literally will do the same topic as me and get hundreds of thousands of views. Whereas the majority of seemingly my subscribers are only watching shorts and won't watch anything else. And shorts are just not the way forward here because YouTube has made it that's the case. They said it was going to be well integrated moving forward. They were going to be, interlocking, and then they just seem to give up on it because that's not how the audience is developed, and they didn't tell us that. I went with what YouTube said to do, and it was a mistake. I mean, yeah, I'd be a lot less subscribers now if I just focused on long form, and I don't hardly make shorts anymore. So I don't. Not really anymore. No, not because none of them are good. It's just I don't have time. I barely even watch World War II TV anymore. I haven't watched in weeks. I just don't have the time. I'm like up to my neck in projects. I know it sounds like I'm complaining and I don't have enough, but when these are gone, I don't know what it's going to be. And some of them were very short term, like they've literally finished. Like that's why I'm able to do a live stream today. Also because my birthday, I wanted to do it. But I haven't been able to do anything else watching stuff. I just don't have the time. But a lot of them I just don't like. I just don't think a lot of them are very good, unfortunately. I mean, that's sad but true. We use Kit way longer than we should. Yeah, I mean, I just don't know what I will do for money in that interim because I think I would only have to focus on that, and then what do I do? You know what I mean? I think I'm screwed no matter what I do. I think I'm screwed, honestly. I just don't know what to do anymore. I don't know. I honestly have no idea. I think I'm at a dead end, honestly. I know it's pessimistic, but we're an hour and a half in. It's just the case. Yeah, I know, Colin, but it's been 3 years. It's not going anywhere. I'm stagnated. Everything's stagnated on me. I can't. I do everything they say to do, and it's not good enough. So it's got to be me. What's the common denominator? No. There's no other way for me to do this. I can't. I mean, there's podcasting, but that is a dying thing. I can't get the traction to get any sponsorships because my numbers aren't big enough. They're just not there. And the ones who do reach out to me are just scams. I'm not going to promote scams. It's just not going to happen. So nobody else comes to me for sponsorships. That's what a lot of other people do. And my subject is not enough to get the one that all the other YouTubers will get. And you know, they don't want to be associated with some of this stuff. But then also I don't have the biggest numbers for the other companies to do it. They'll go with anybody, some of them. And then the military ones have their people, and then that's it. They won't go to anybody else. So it is what it is. Oh, thanks, Colin. I appreciate it. And James, thank you. Thank you for the super sticker. I appreciate it. Sorry, what do you mean? Would a website with the video and paperwork loaded be an option? Like, you mean the sources and stuff? I mean, I could make my own website. I don't think it would get any hits, though. Because at least with the problems that it is, at least the YouTube has the algorithm that will push stuff. Other than that, I don't know. Anyway, this is a good spot to say thank you to patrons and YouTube channel members. Thank you all for your support. This is literally what's keeping me afloat. The Colonel of the Regiment, of the OTD Regiment, SigFig, thank you so much for your massive support recently. I did send the books to you if you're watching. Sorry, I had last week was insane. Sorry. And patrons, thank you. You guys are literally keeping me going. Literally keeping this afloat. Without it, if it drops any more than it does, I'm done. It's just truth. You guys know I don't like to lie or hide stuff. It's not who I am. If this doesn't, it's not even if it dips. If it dips, I'm done. I just can't do this other than a couple hours a week. And then stuff will come out like every 6 months because it's just so much work. It's so much work. It's so hard to do this stuff. I'm not trying to complain. It's just so hard. Yeah, I mean, I could. I kind of try to do that already in some ways. Like it's easier to share documents on Patreon than it is here, right? With the YouTube, like posts and everything. Like you can't upload like PDFs and things like that. I can load them up. I have Dropbox, and it's harder to do. Yeah, it's hard to do it here, but on Patreon is what I do. I try to share it as much as possible. Like it's usually the indication of what's coming is because I'll share stuff I'm literally working on, and I'll be like, "Oh, I got to share this, or I can share this. This is cool." Or I think people like this, like the maps and stuff. Like it is. Yeah, thank you, Judith. I appreciate your support. It's been great to have and to learn. Everything you've got going with the CAN loan, and I'm sorry I haven't been able to get to that. It's not a popular topic, and I have to pull so much together. It's a hard one to do, and I'm not sure how to get into it. Like find my way in, as I try to say, with the to make it popular. I'm still batting an idea around in my head. It's just difficult to do, but yeah. Yeah, every 6 months we'll get it out there. Yeah, it will. It's so much work to do it the way I think it needs to be done. I can't keep it up, and that means other parts will have to go, and I don't know what to focus on because I don't know what works the best and all that stuff. I don't know. I keep saying that, but that's just the truth. I don't know. Lots of thinking. Yeah, I mean, one of the things I decided, or why I did the channel in the first place, is I enjoy doing it. I put together some videos. I got the RCR Museum in London, Ontario. They brought me on to do some Hong Kong stuff, and I need to do a little editing, and I really sorry, I really enjoyed the process and presenting history in that way and all that stuff. So it kind of got me hooked. And then I was like, well, I'm going to start doing things I want to see, which I now realize is not the way to be successful here. You have to just do what all will catch attention and what gets people basically mad. That's the only thing that seems to work in the military history space. On YouTube is just pissing people off, unless you've been at this for 10 years, and then people will follow you. No matter what you do, even if it's complete and pure garbage. Certain YouTuber out there, that's all he does, and has millions of views. Anyway, yeah, so I don't know. That's how I've always thought about it, and then asking people what they want, which I've tried to do as much as I can, and not as successful as I'd like. Well, I appreciate that, going down with the ship. I mean, it won't ever disappear. Like, I won't delete the channel or anything like that, but what it'll be moving forward, I don't know. Yeah. Oh, I know, Kevin. I know. Oh, I 100% know. I've literally been told this to my face multiple times by governments. They're like, we'll interview you. They're like, do you speak French? I go, not well enough to converse. And they go, well, there's no point in continuing the interview. I went, oh, okay. Because they can get as many bilingual candidates as they want. And that's all that matters to me, seemingly, that I've had my experience. I've literally been told this, then that's literally the reason why I didn't get a certain job, is because of the bilingualism. Everything else didn't matter. Anyway, well, the plan was never to stay here. Right, I'm a Londoner by birth. Right, I was born, raised there. No, I can never say that online. I never planned to stay here. I came here for school because I wanted to work with my supervisor, because he was the expert on Hong Kong, and that's what I wanted to do. And then I was going to go wherever I needed to go. I never planned on staying here. Life threw curveballs as it does, and now I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. So it is what it is. I know I need to learn French, or I just need to get a job somewhere else or in private sector, then it won't matter, which I'm trying to do, because I think that's my only option. Anyway, I don't want to keep talking about that. It's too depressing. Anyway, any other questions? I can finish up with a few more. Other than that, thank you for hanging out. Almost 2 hours. Oh my. Yes, it's a different London. Actually, my great-grandfather was born in London, England. Yeah, my great-grandfather was actually a Londoner, born in England. And where did he move? London, Ontario. He did not want to learn another city, I guess. A lot of the names in the streets carry over, too. Yeah, it's funny. It's so funny. Yeah, I went to Western. That's where I did my undergrad, my master's. Yeah. Well, yeah, all this cost you is your time. It's a valuable commodity. Colin, unfortunately, I don't want to sound like I'm important, because I'm not. It's just I have other things that I do that help me pay the bills. This does as well in some ways. I'm also saddled with so much debt. My God, it's not a typical Canadian story because our universities aren't as expensive as the US, but I am like saddled with so much debt that is dragging me down. So I need to figure that out. To not have it as the millstone around my neck, which is what it is. So I don't know. I have limited time and some other stuff going on that I don't want to talk about on here. That's not for public consumption. So there's that. So it's not just the time, it's the time can also be spent doing. Anyway, I don't want to talk about that on here, but yeah, I went to UWO as well, or as Western as they're now calling them, find a rich girlfriend. Well, I'm married, so that's not going to work. I'm married, so that's not an option on the table, unfortunately. Anyway, so yeah, so thanks for hanging out. I appreciate it. I'll say it again, if you can, Patreon is the best way to support me. because they take the least amount of cuts. If you can support through there, it's the best way. So, and I'm trying to do more on there too. Because the other platforms are really moving away from even, I know, free to use and all that stuff, but even supporting things like links. Like they won't let you, they'll crush your post if you link out. I can't post PDFs on Twitter, Elon. So you know what I mean? So it's harder to share stuff. So I try my best. But yeah, so I'm trying to share more stuff there. But Patreon is the best way forward if you can, please. Yeah. Rich ladies, yeah, any rich ladies I know, I'm sending them your way, Colin. Send them to Bayou and to the pub. I'm sure they'll find you there eventually. Yeah, so thanks everybody. I appreciate it. Got some videos coming up next week, so if you can watch those, that would be great. That's another way to support the channel if you can't financially, is watch the videos. That helps more people who watch them. The longer you watch, the more you watch, the better. If you watch a couple OTD videos, full length all the way through, especially if they're new releases, helps immensely. So if you can do that, please consider doing it. Anyway, I will try to stay positive. I will have some thinking time. Send you photos of what? I don't know what that means. Anyway, you guys know how to get a hold of me if you need to. Anyway, so yes, thanks. I will give all this stuff lots of thoughts, and into the new year, at least I have some time. So thank you. Other than that, enjoyed hanging out. It was great. Great way to spend a couple hours on my birthday. All right, everyone, have a good night, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.